So, welcome again to Spain, and once again you find me here next to the Mediterranean coast. And you know, the naked bike sector is a sector of the motorcycle industry now that is really full of a lot of positive activity. There's new bikes coming along, there's refreshed bikes coming along, and Ducati are absolutely no different to everyone else. You know, they've come out with two new Street Fighters this year, which, you know, a little bit like buses, you kind of wait for one and then two come along. And the latest one I've come down here to the sunshine to try is their new V2, which is very interesting and possibly the most interesting of them all, because it signifies a massive departure for Ducati in terms of their philosophy for that particular model. So I better go and take these flip-flops off, put some riding gear on and go and give it a try. So here I am at the end of a day, absolutely fantastic day. Done about 220 kilometers on the Ducati Streetfighter V2 S. And I have to say, I'll get to it in a bit, but what a wonderful motorcycle. But what I want to do first is just quickly whiz through the main headlines to do with this bike, which are really important because this is a massive departure for Ducati, this bike is. And it's not possible to overstate that. They've gone down the less is more kind of approach with this bike, which is to say they've kind of stripped back what was the original smaller Street Fighter, the 955 V2, and they've kind of gone back to a much more sort of basic sort of formula, like they have done with the Panigale. So just like the V4S, the V2 uses a massive amount, nearly all of its components from the Panigale V2. So let's just quickly touch base with some of the main key points here, starting with the engine, which of course, like on the V2, which Bruce has reviewed already, is a brand new engine for Ducati, and this is probably the biggest step for them. Principally, it's they've done away with the Desmo valve system, which has been one of Ducati's signatures and hallmarks for like ever. And now it uses a traditional valve timing train with actually some quite trick hollow valves in there. Now, by doing away with all of that, the bike is, the engine rather, is a lot lighter. In fact, this engine cashes in at 9.5 kilos lighter than the 955 engine. It's making 120 horsepower, and it's actually quite a trick thing, even though on the surface it looks like it's kind of Ducati have gone backwards with it. It's got variable valve timing on the inlet cams. and it delivers 70% of its maximum torque at just 3,000 RPM. Like I say, it's got those trick hollow valves, and it's still a 90-degree layout, which Ducati have always used. But in this application, they've tilted the engine back a small amount, really mainly principally for the purpose of getting the packaging of the bike more compact to achieve the geometry and wheelbases that they were looking for. So about 120 horsepower, which on the surface looks like it's a step back, but actually it's very deliberate by Ducati, because they want to create a separation in between their V4 and their sort of, I suppose if you want to call it, their entry level baby Street Fighter, and this is it. By going down this road now, there's a clear space between those two bikes. Now, when you put the race exhaust, there is of course a race exhaust that goes with it. That adds another 6 horsepower and takes another 4 kilos off the weight of the bike. So that's your engine. The other thing that's notable about the engine is, of course, it actually forms part of the frame, which is another key part of the Ducati's, the Street Fighters, sort of headlines really. So the engine is a stress member, and as I say, forms part of the frame. So what you have then is this monocoque setup. They've not used the front frame, which you see on the V4 and the Monster. They're using this monocoque frame, which, as I say, is the same as what they have on the Panigale V2, which doubles up as the airbox. It bolts to the top of the engine, and on the front of that is the front steering setup with the triple clamps. So it's quite a trick thing actually, and when you see it in the flesh, this bike without any of the bodywork and literally just its chassis, its rolling chassis, it's extraordinary just how little there is there. It's quite a clever piece of engineering. It gets its own swing arm, and just like the Panigale and the Street Fighter V4, Panigale V4, Street Fighter V4, Panigale V2, and obviously now the Street Fighter V2, Ducati have gone with a double-sided swing arm, which is all about weight saving and having some mechanical flex to generate grip out of the tyres. So it gets its own bespoke swing arm. It's not the swing arm from the Panigale V2. This one's actually 30 millimeters longer. And as a consequence of that, they've had to rework the rear suspension, so it's a bit more progressive to compensate for the longer swing arm, which basically means, the further you go into the stroke of the suspension, the firmer it gets to take up some of that extra leverage that's coming from the length. So it has its own rear shock. The shock isn't out of the Panigale. 30 mil longer swing arm, but the wheelbase is still that really aggressive wheelbase. Going up to the front, there is slightly lazier geometry at the front in terms of the steering, and the forks have got less preload on them. They've got the same springs in there that you have in the Panigale V2, but they've taken some preload off to soften them. But they've got completely different valving internals to soften the ride, to bring a bit more comfort into the picture, because this is really a road bike when all's said and done. And the last thing really to note about the sort of geometry and the chassis kind of setup is the handlebars relative to the Panigale. Obviously they're higher, but they're also 30 millimeters wider, so 15 millimeters on each handlebar, which is it's a massive amount. That's actually a significant amount, and that's obviously there to go with the whole agility and keep the bike turning. Now, the electronics are identical to the Panigale. They're brought straight over across, which is itself is a whole new suite of electronics. We've got 4 riding modes, obviously wet, road, sport and race modes, which is as you'd expect, and the rider aids, which are all adjustable and switch offable apart from the ABS. Is ABS, obviously traction control, anti-wheelie, engine braking, and it has Ducati's latest trick quick shifter, which is a whole new system where the sensor is actually internal. Thing about the ABS though, you can go down into the lower mode. You can never switch ABS off, but once you go into mode 1, it disables the rear ABS, so you can do a bit of backing in and skids and mess about a lot on that. So those are the kind of headline figures. There's lots of other details really about this bike. Obviously it's got its own its own set of bodywork and design to keep the whole Street Fighter vibe going on, which Ducati actually pull off quite well. It's got these quite trick little exhausts, which are nice to see. But the whole ethos of this bike is where the shift is. You know, we can talk about the tech, we can talk about the chassis, but the big, really most important thing about this bike is this is Ducati going into a different space in the market, and what they've come up with here is 175 kilos with no fuel in the tank, and like I say, about 120 horsepower, which, you know, on paper is a really good recipe for a lot of fun, because, you know, everything's better when there's no weight or less weight. Everything is. It's just physics says so. So really, all that's really left to touch on now is what's it been like to ride today. Well, you know, we did a couple of 100 Ks today, some of it on motorway, some of it in the mountains around here, which are just obviously nirvana for motorcycling, and the sort of place that this bike absolutely thrives. And all I can say is that it is the first thing really that stands out about this bike is that it is massive fun. And I'm talking about fun on a level that, and I say this is almost like damning praise really, but it's fun on a level that I can honestly say I've never experienced on any Ducati ever before, you know. It's really easy to ride, it wheelies dead easy, not that you'd ever know, just because, you know, we can't use those footage or anything like that. But it's a hell of a lot of fun, it's dead easy to ride, it's really engaging, you know, it gets hold of you. It wants to play. It makes a really great noise out of that airbox, and because the airbox is a cast alloy airbox, you know, there's a resonance that comes out of it, and it's right underneath the fuel tank, and it's just shouting at you the whole time, whether you're on the gas or off the gas or back shifting or throwing gears back at it. It's just right there beneath you, and it's right in your eardrums. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. Really engaging. I spent a bit of time going through the modes, and, you know, to be perfectly honest and blunt, it's got 120 horsepower. It's an easy bike to ride. It's not, you'd have to try really, really hard for this bike to bite you. So, you know, in the past I've talked about bikes like my ZX6 and Triumph Street Triples and, you know, the KTM Duke 990. And often when you get on these bikes, it's just easier to just switch everything off and just let it be you and the bike. And that's kind of how I ended up with this bike today. I tried the modes, they were great, they did what they said on the tin, and, you know, you can't ask for more than that. So I'm certainly not going to criticise it, but in the end, it is what it is. It's just a 120 horsepower punchy bike that, you know, without everything switched on, is actually kind of a bit better for it. You know, the engine, the power delivery on the engine is so linear, and because you get that big hit of torque initially, there's no more surprises further up through the power delivery. So, you know, it goes bam, as soon as you hit the gas out of a corner, it jumps ahead, and it does it in using, you know, dollops of torque rather than massive quantities of power that, you know, can overwhelm. And everything's perfectly manageable. And the bike comes on these Pirelli Diablo Rosso 4s, which are great tyres, really great tyres. Interestingly, the rear tyres are 190 section, which I'm surprised about, to be honest with you, because it's a little bit overkill for this bike. I would have expected, to be honest with you, something like a 180 in the rear there. But Ducati have gone with a 190, and they've obviously got their reasons for it. But all that I'm really talking about there, or referencing there, is the fact that there's huge amounts of grip from the chassis, from the tyres, from the suspension, and when it comes to the rider aids, especially like, you know, your traction control especially, you kind of don't really need them, but I get why they're there, and that's okay. Things I'm kind of not sure about with it, which were a little bit, I'm not even going to say disappointing, just something that I noticed for the wrong reason really, is just the switch gear on it is really hard to feel through your gloves, and it's a bit cramped on the actual cluster. But saying that, you know, once you do, you can't kind of feel when you've cancelled your indicator, and you can't really feel when you're clicking through the modes as you're riding along. It's just not very direct, and this is usually an area that Ducati excel at, you know, massively. So I can forgive it for that, and I freely admit I'm properly nitpicking here. But behind that, though, as usual, the actual interface with the electronic systems and all the settings is absolutely gold standard on this bike. It's amazing how you can jump on one of these and just know where to go to do what you need to do. It just makes complete sense. So what do we think all about it? I mean, we need to get one of these back in the UK. You know, we've ridden it here in a perfect setting on a perfect day, and as I say, we've had the V2S here, and I suppose it's probably worth mentioning that the V2S is the one with the Olin suspension, and then the base Streetfighter V2 has Mazzocchi and Caeva suspension, and there's a price difference there. Obviously, the V2 is 13,990, and the V2S, this one with the Olins, comes in at 15,990, which is quite a lot of money for a 120 horsepower bike. But here's the thing, you know, this is a very populated area of the market now, and there's bikes being developed. There's new models coming into this space. This is where all the activity is at the moment. And you know, can this bike make a case for coming in at 15,990? It probably can. It certainly can at 13,990. You know, you're well on your way into some of its competitors' territory in terms of price point. But that, you know, kind of that's up to you. There's a lot of bikes in this space that are also a lot of fun and are also a good value. And when we get them all together back in the UK, you know, we'll see how the Streetfighter measures up. But what I am certain of is it will measure up completely differently to how the previous Streetfighter did, which we had in the magazine a couple of years ago, and it left us a little bit cold when we put it up against the likes of the Triumph and the KTM. It was just a little bit too kind of serious, really. And that's where I suppose my final thought on this bike really needs to come from, really, when I leave here and head for the plane shortly to get home. It's a wonderful motorcycle. It really, really is. From an engineering point of view, from a dynamic point of view, it does absolutely everything that you'd expect it to do. You know, you don't really need me to tell you this is going to be a good laugh to ride. It's 170 kilos, it's 120 horsepower, it's got a big dollops of torque, it's well made, it's got a high spec. It's not going to be a bad bike, and it isn't. The most interesting thing about this bike, though, is for me, and this is, as I say, quite a bold statement, that this is, I think, the most fun Ducati certainly I've ever ridden, and it's the most fun Ducati I can ever think of that Ducati have ever made. And I know that's a huge statement, but I honestly can't think of a bike that Ducati have produced in my lifetime that just is there to be good value and massive fun. You know, Ducati makes serious bikes, and not saying this isn't serious, it is. It's a piece of engineering, there's no question about that, but what they've set at the top of the brief this time is to be a good fun bike, and they've absolutely nailed it. And I doff my cap to Ducati. I'm thrilled to see them take a less serious approach to this bike and deliver something that, if you're new to the market and this was your first Ducati, you're going to instantly fall in love with it. Of that, I'm sure. So in conclusion, yeah, Ducati have gone down the less is more road, and I think they've done absolutely the right thing, and they've completely nailed the brief with the Streetfighter V2. So thanks for watching the video, and if you've got any questions, put them in the comments, and certainly if you've enjoyed watching this or any other videos on the channel, don't forget to like and subscribe.